Hello, I'm Locke, Meredith. I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where my guest is Sid Gautreaux. He is the Sheriff of East Baton Rouge Parish. Sheriff Gautreaux is going to talk to us about the great tragedy of 2016, the death of Alton Sterling and the murder of 3 law enforcement officers and 3 others seriously wounded. He's going to talk about what the law enforcement community has learned from it and how our community is going to come together over this. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Sheriff Sid Gautreaux.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I have a Legal Lines tip for you. Remember, knowledge is power, and I want you to know if you're injured, Louisiana law grants you a variety of claims to make sure you're fully compensated. It's generally chopped up into several categories, the first being general damages. That's going to compensate you for your mental and physical pain and suffering, your scarring, disability, functional limitations, your loss of enjoyment of life. Also, it will compensate your family, frankly, for your loss of affection. It's called loss of consortium claim. Next category is specific damages. Those would be, say, for example, past and future lost wages, past and future medical expenses. You also have a claim sometimes for what's called punishment damages or punitive damages, typically only available when you're injured by a drunk party. Finally, you're entitled to legal interest from the date you file your lawsuit until you're paid and court costs. So my Legal Lines tip to you from me, Locke Meredith, make sure you know what your claims are.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have back on the show the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff Sid Gautreaux. Sid, it's great to see you.
Always a pleasure,
again.
Locke.
Well,
thank you for having me.
I thank you very much for making time in this crazy stuff we're going through. And let's kind of dive in. 2016 was one of the most difficult times seemingly in the history of this city. We went through the tragedies of Mr. Sterling, the murdered police officers, wounded police officers and deputies, and then we had the flood. Right. So I want to talk to you about how we're dealing with all those tragedies. You know, let's first talk about just what we're dealing with from a law enforcement and a community standpoint, from trust or the lack thereof because of what's gone on in 2016. My recall is it was like a powder keg. You had police officers being murdered and deputies being murdered, law enforcement of all kinds being murdered all over the nation. Dallas had just been under tremendous tragedy with the 5 officers being killed there. We had the tragedy with Mr. Sterling, and then the horror of having 6 of our law enforcement personnel being shot. 3 right. Killed, 3 wounded. Mr. Tillier just still fighting for every breath.
For his life, that's right. Well, Locke, you know, I look back on my 41 years of law enforcement here in East Baton Rouge Parish, and you already said it. This past summer was the worst time in my career, and I think it was the worst time in law enforcement here in East Baton Rouge Parish, period. You know, we've had floods before, nothing to the magnitude of what we had this time.
Hurricanes.
Yeah, we've had deputies and officers that have been killed in the line of duty, nothing to this magnitude. You know, and we've had protests and demonstrations in the past, but nothing to this magnitude. So it was a tough time all the way around, you know, and we go back and we start with the Sterling shooting, and really I can't comment on it. My agency was not involved in that incident, nor were we involved with the investigation into that incident. And
there is an investigation being taken place.
Right. And
by the federal government, as I recall, and the
right,
state
it's
police.
The Department of Justice is looking into it. They're investigating for any possible civil rights violations. But as you know, as a result of that incident, there was a lot of unrest, a lot of discord, and I fully recognize that there was a lot of fear and anxiety, there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of frustration, and people, every American citizen has a right to express their opinions and express Absolutely. Their views, and I for one certainly recognize that right, and I'm going to do everything I can as a sworn law enforcement officer to protect that right. But at the same token, you know, we're not going to tolerate any lawlessness. We're not going to tolerate anybody aggression against the other person.
Well, you got to protect the
violence or destruction, and we're not going to tolerate it. But we knew that people had that right, and we knew there was, and rightfully so, they needed to have that expression. It was a tragic event. As far as where that's going, as you and I sit here today, I know no more than you know. All I know that there is an investigation into it. I don't know what their findings are going to be. I don't know whether they're going to find one or both of the officers guilty of civil rights violations or not. But I know this, their decision is forthcoming. I don't know when it's going to happen, but when it does, we all have to be prepared to
the community needs to stay
you know, whether you agree with the finding or not, we need to deal with that, learn, and move forward. But it's not going to be over with just after that finding comes out, because that's just the Department of Justice investigation into it in regards to the civil rights, possible civil rights violations. Once they finish with their investigation, it's going to go to the state AG. The Attorney General for the state will do his investigation and will look into it to determine if there's any criminal laws that have been violated. So it's not. It's not
folks need to remember that.
Right. It's gonna. This is not going to be over with. This is not a one and done thing. It's not going to be over. It's going to draw out for a longer period.
And frankly, even after that, there's probably civil litigation that will take place.
That's right. And so, you know, we know that that we're in for a lot more. But let me say this, Locke. When you look at what's going on around this country today, and you look at any other questionable police shooting or similar event that's taking place across this nation, what have you seen? You've seen violence. You've seen destruction of property. You've seen protesters injured. You've seen innocent people in the public injured. You've seen law enforcement personnel, firemen injured. When I look at what happened here in Baton Rouge, and we had 3 intense days of protest, but there was no destruction of property. We only had one protester that was arrested, that was injured.
And he was from out of state, wasn't he?
Right, and we only had one law enforcement officer that was injured. So although we have lessons to learn as well in the law enforcement community, and we have learned them, and we've taken steps to do some things different than we did last time. I'm very proud of the fact that you didn't see here in Baton Rouge what has happened across the country.
Absolutely.
In similar things.
And let me tell you something, Sheriff. Said you guys, Colonel Mike Edmondson with the state police, and the police chief Carl Dabadie, and you and the rest of the folks, the Fed and state guys, y'all pulled together and y'all protected the community, but did allow the expression of great concern and worry and frustration and anger.
And we'll continue to do that. And you're right, we all pull together, work together. But I don't want to sit here as law enforcement and say we're the only reason that nothing worse happened, because it's the people of Baton Rouge.
You're right.
It's the people of Baton Rouge.
Right.
We as a people, as a whole, are better than that. It's not to say that we don't have some people living here that would like to see those things happen. They would like to see destruction take place. But the vast majority are good, God-fearing people who,
on both sides of these issues.
On both sides of these issues. And there were people in the faith-based community that stepped up to the plate to help keep a lid on this. We had most of, not all, but most of our elected officials and community officials, they did the same. They stepped forward to help try to keep peace, maintain order, and help people express themselves, but in an orderly and peacefully fashion. And so it was a conglomerate of those things. And I think, you know, I hope and pray that whenever this decision comes out, whatever it may be and wherever it goes from there, that we continue in that same mode. But those things just don't happen overnight. You know, we as law enforcement officials, we as elected officials, we have to continually reach out to our community and build relationships. And that's what we've done. We didn't wait till this happened and then say, oh, we need your help.
I went and read your mission statement. Yeah. Again, I've read it before, and I did the same on the various other law enforcement. We've done numerous shows with both previous Chief White and you and Hiller and so many, Colonel Edmondson. And y'all have consistently, for years, talked about needing the community for help and support and vice versa. And it seemed to manifest itself through this tragedy.
I think it did. I think it proved itself out in that, because, you know, those people, we didn't just start having conversations with all those people when this happened.
Those relationships
We've been having
already
those
existed.
relationships, building those relationships for years. And that's what it takes. It takes a community that cares. And it's not just me, you, it's all of us. It's the entire community.
All right, well, we'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines. My special guest, Sheriff Sid Gautreaux. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with a Legal Lines tip for you. Document your claim. What do I mean? Whenever you present a claim, whether it's for injuries in an automobile collision or for a breach of contract case or a business claim, it all boils down to documentation and evidence. For example, when you go to trial, basically both sides are presenting their evidence of what they believe to be their case. For example, also, if you're involved in an automobile collision, document the event. Talk to all the parties who are involved. Get their names, address, contact information, insurance info. Talk to the witnesses on the scene. Also get their contact information. Take photographs. With the phones we all have these days, everybody can take a picture and that paints 1,000 words. So document your claim. The Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is document the claim.
This has been Legal Lines Tips.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. I'm very pleased to have back on the show the Sheriff of East Baton Rouge Parish, Sid Gautreaux. Sid, let's dive back in. It's such a tragedy that the city's been through, really our whole geographic region. Let's talk about the day of the great tragedy where we had 6 law enforcement officers shot, 3 murdered, 3 wounded, and 1 horribly still wounded.
Yeah. Well, you know, that was the week after the initial protest, and this year I'm serving as president of the Sheriff's Association, and we had our annual convention planned in Lake Charles, at LaBerge in Lake Charles, and I was supposed to go there Friday. But I sent my family, and I told people, I said, I'm not coming Friday. I want to see how things go Friday. And I said, I'm not sure whether I'm coming Saturday because I want to see how that went. And in fact, I told our executive director, Mike Renatz, I said, Mike, I might just be here for the things I have to be at as president. I might not be here for the whole thing. But be that as it may, Friday was very calm. We didn't have a problem. There was no problems with Friday. Saturday night, we had no problems. So Saturday night, I don't know, about 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, I made a decision I was going to go ahead and go to Lake Charles. So I went to Lake Charles. I got there Saturday night, and then of course Sunday morning, 8:30, I get the call of what had taken place here in Baton Rouge, and Colonel Mike Edmondson was there, and we got on his helicopter and we flew back straight to the hospital, check on my deputies. But it was just a horrible, horrible thing. That was the first time I've ever lost anybody in law enforcement, and something I don't want to have to go through again. And pray I don't.
None of us do.
You know, I've had deputies and officers injured in the line of duty, but it never has it cost them their life. This was just crazy. I mean, you know, it was something surreal. Of course, my fellow sheriffs, we canceled the conference, and many of them came here to help us in the aftermath of that. But, you know, we have this guy who and is still under investigation with the feds and the state police, but we had this guy who we know left his home up north. He went to Dallas, and this was, you know, that was a week in between
where
those
Dallas, 5 law enforcement individuals were murdered.
We know he spent at least 1 day in Dallas, possibly 2, and then he came to Baton Rouge, and he was in Baton Rouge at least 3 days before the shooting. We know where he stayed, and we've talked to several people.
And it was all clearly premeditated.
Yeah, it was
premeditated. I mean, he dressed up and ammoed up.
He came here with the sole purpose of killing law enforcement officers, and as long as you had a badge, a uniform, that was his.
And your color didn't matter.
Didn't matter whether you were black or white.
White, green, yellow.
It didn't matter to him. He came here with a specific intent to kill law enforcement. And as you know, it all occurred that morning on Airline at Benny's Car Wash and the beauty shop on the south side and the fitness expo on the north side at those 3 businesses.
And he killed 2 Baton Rouge police officers.
Killed 2 Baton Rouge police officers.
And 1 sheriff deputy.
Right.
And then wounded 2 deputies and 1 Baton Rouge City
He
police
actually,
officer.
there was 6 involved. There was 3 Baton Rouge City police officers involved and 3 sheriff's deputies are involved. 2 of the Baton Rouge City officers were killed. And then the 3rd Baton Rouge City officer was actually in his car. He was shooting at him through his car, and a bullet grazed his head, but he was treated and released, thank goodness. We lost 1 deputy there at the scene. We had another one that was shot in the arm, and he will return to duty at some point.
So he had a couple of surgeries.
Yeah, he's gone through several surgeries over it. And of course, we still have our 3rd. Brad Garafola was the officer who was killed on the scene. Bruce Simmons was the one who was shot in the arm. And of course, Nick Touye is the one who is still fighting for his life as we speak.
Was shot in the head and in the body.
And in the torso. And, you know, I was there at the hospital when the surgeons came and talked to his parents, and the surgeon said that he wasn't probably going to make it through the night. Well, he did. Then it was he probably wouldn't make it past 5 days, and he did. And then it wasn't going to, you know, maybe a month. And you know the rest of the story. He's still alive. And it's a miracle that he's still alive.
Every one of these gentlemen also had a family. They had a wife and kids and loved ones.
And, you know, and it's a tragedy to see young men who have dedicated their life to public service. And I can tell you, these 3 individuals were true public servants. And, you know, you and I have talked about this on previous shows. There's only one reason to be in law enforcement, and that's to serve.
Sure, not the money.
No. and we don't manufacture some good or sell some commodity. All we do is provide a service to the community and to the entire community. And these 3 guys epitomized what being a public servant is all about, and they were just exemplary deputies, all 3 of them. And Nick, you know, we asked continue prayers for Nick. You know, my heart goes out to all of them, and my heart goes out to Tanya and her kids. That was Brad's wife, and what Nick and his wife are going through. But I mean, Bruce and his wife. But you know, I can't sit here and tell you as a parent, how, I mean, my heart breaks for Nick Touye. It breaks for his mother and dad because they haven't left his side since this has happened. And to sit there and see your son going through what he's going through.
Well, I read,
you know.
Sid, this month he got shipped off to Texas Hospital because he had infection in the wound near his rib cage, right? And then also had pneumonia.
Yeah, he was actually sent to TIR. It's a facility over there, a rehab facility, one of the best in the nation. And they had him in that, but they had to take him from there into a hospital, a local hospital, because of what you just said. He developed some fever and some infection and developed pneumonia, so they had to take him out of the rehab hospital and put him in a regular hospital to address those issues.
What type of benefits are available as our society provides for the families of these heroes?
Well, we've had some there's some benefits that are available through Louisiana, state of Louisiana, for law enforcement officers who are killed or injured in the line of duty. They also have you get some national from the government in Washington. There are also some funding and things that are available there. They've received those benefits already,
thank God.
To my knowledge.
Sure, it doesn't even come close.
And then of course, you know, you got survivors of cops and stuff that help. And then of course, I can tell you, I can speak. There's people that have put a foundation together, like Patty and Glade has done, to help provide all these families with medical benefits and monetary support. I can tell you, from my standpoint, I had friends and supporters who donated, I think at this point, close to $150,000 that's gone to those deputies, so and their families. So you know, that's what's there. You know,
they need our prayers and our thoughts and our love as much as
they're going to need it
their whole lives.
A long time. We'll be going to Washington in May. It's National Police Week, and a part of National Police Week is recognizing the fallen officers, so we'll be there for that.
Fantastic. We'll continue this. It's Locke, Meredith, Legal Lines. My special guest, Sheriff Sid Gautreaux. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with a Legal Lines tip for you. Document your claim. What do I mean? Whenever you present a claim, whether it's for injuries in an automobile collision or for a breach of contract case or a business claim, it all boils down to documentation and evidence. For example, when you go to trial, basically both sides are presenting their evidence of what they believe to be their case. For example, also, if you're involved in an automobile collision, document the event. Talk to all the parties who are involved. Get their names, address, contact information, insurance info. Talk to the witnesses on the scene. Also get their contact information. Take photographs. With the phones we all have these days, everybody can take a picture and that paints 1,000 words. So document your claim. The Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is document the claim.
This has been Legal Lines Tips.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Pleased to have back on the show Sheriff Sid Gautreaux. Sid, we were talking about the horror and tragedy of the murdered law enforcement officers and those that were wounded, and Mr. Touye, who's still horribly wounded. Tell me about the morale of law enforcement, and as I understand it, this is a national trend here in Baton Rouge and really all over the nation.
You know, and I hear this from my colleagues, not only across this state but across this nation. You know, I'm one of the major county sheriffs association. I'm a member of that, and this is something that's affected law enforcement throughout the United States, and it has affected morale tremendously. You know, never in my lifetime have I ever seen the outright aggression towards law enforcement that you see today. You know,
officers sitting in their car in New York, murdered,
being ambushed. I mean, it's just, you know, it's really horrible, and it does affect them, and it affects their families. And you know, I can tell you, after what happened here in Baton Rouge, we've lost a few deputies. Jason Ard, Livingston Parish, he's lost some.
You want to show with him next?
Yeah, they've lost Baton Rouge City police officers. I can tell you that retention and recruitment, it's affected both. We've had some deputies who I know that I feel like probably wouldn't have taken early retirements that have, and our applicants have dropped. You know, we're not seeing as many come in, and you know, I'm going to give you something that I brought with me, and I read it. In fact, Hiller sent it to me, and I read it, and it shows a poll of cops shows the Ferguson effect is all too real.
And this is stats that were taken, a poll that was taken before the Dallas murders and the Baton Rouge murders.
Before the Baton Rouge police, the incident, this is before the Dallas or Baton Rouge incidents. And it was done by a nonpartisan Pew poll. And they were studying the so-called Ferguson effect on law enforcement. And make it short, this was in the New York Post.
Okay.
The article's in the New York Post. But they polled some 8,000 police officers across the nation. And it showed that 93% of the officers say they've grown more concerned about their safety. 76% are more reluctant to use force when it's necessary to use force. 75% believe in interactions between police and the black community have become more tense. 72% say they're more reluctant to stop and question suspicious-looking people and activity, and 67% report being verbally abused. And that's what the challenge is to me as a sheriff, and it's a challenge to all of us in law enforcement. You know, we are sworn to uphold and protect, and we understand that these concerns that deputies and officers have are real.
Yep. And
so how do you balance that? We don't want them to underreact and get killed or injured, but we don't want them to overreact and do something stupid as well, right. You know. So in the same token, you know, you got to we constantly tell them, be mindful of your surroundings. You have to be more mindful of your surroundings now than ever before. But we also teach them, don't overreact. and it's hard. It's a thin line there.
Well,
it's a very thin line.
Let's talk about what we're seeing on the local level. I know in my head I've chopped up, there's political steps that are being taken to some degree, and then there's kind of on the front lines steps by law enforcement. So I've read recently that our new mayor, Sharon Broome, has, number one, said that she wants Police Chief Carl Dabney to leave or step down or retire or something. And I think I've read that he's considering retiring, or he retires in a year. Mm-hmm. And then likewise that she is codifying what the chief said were already the rules that were imposed on the police officers for the city of Baton Rouge. And that's written regulations on how you're going to use force,
right.
Lethal force.
Right.
And so hopefully, and even the chief said that makes the officers more accountable if they go over the line. I've seen that the Metro Council, sadly, seems to be divided based on race and your political affiliation, Republican or Democrat. And that any proposals that have been put forward to try and deal with this on a political level aren't going to happen. So then I'll look at you guys. Tell me what you guys are doing.
Well, number one, whether it's what we're doing or what the council's doing or anybody else, it should have absolutely nothing to do about race or political affiliation. It should have to be everything to do with accountability and support and working through problems and to make everything better.
One of the murdered police officers was a black man
I thought
with
that
a
was
young child.
What Montrell said, just what he wrote
on his Facebook
right
post.
before his death was unbelievable. It was just prophetic, and it gives me chills when I think about it.
So
what I've told my guys is this in my department, and that's the only thing I control is my department. We're going to continue to do what we know is right to do. We're going to continue to do the community policing and the stuff that we've been doing for years. But not only are we going to continue at the level, we're going to strengthen it, because it's incumbent upon us now to reach out to the community even more.
Because there's fear.
But on the same token, for the community to expect us to have the results that they want us to have and what we want to have in reducing crime and the murder rate and everything else, we got to have their involvement. You know, I don't care where you live. I don't care if you live behind the richest gated community in East Baton Rouge Parish or you live in the poorest part of this parish. You all have a responsibility to help yourself and help us help you.
Because without their eyes and ears, you got nothing.
Ronnie Edwards said it best. She said, any efforts on law enforcement will be short-lived without community involvement. And she was absolutely right.
That's right.
We have to do our part. And we strive to do our part. And you know, the relationships we talked about earlier on the program, those just didn't happen overnight. They just didn't happen because I said so or somebody else said so. It happened because we're out there every day talking to people and reaching out to people and saying, what's going on here? How can we help you?
Well, and I've seen that law enforcement is reaching into the schools now to get children young and to educate them on the roles and the services and protection provided by law enforcement, and that's wonderful.
That's right. And in no time in our history, the country's history, or Louisiana's history, East Baton Rouge Parish's history, is this more important for us to come together as one people and to deal with our problems. Has all the police shootings you've seen, questionable police shootings across the country, have they all been right? No. There's been some things that I saw, as soon as I saw it, I was horrified at what I saw.
Horrible. What
in the world are they thinking? There's no place for that, and you get rid of it. But let's go to training. I kind of become incensed by some people that suggest that we just don't have any training.
Right.
That's ludicrous. We don't. We have training. We've got cultural diversity. We've got conflict resolution. We have de-escalation. We have all those things. My opinion is that we need to do more. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just got to do more.
Make sure it's working.
Of course, we're open to suggestion too from anybody that comes up with something new that I don't know and that says, "Why don't y'all try this?" You know, and I'm receptive to that. But being president of the Sheriff's Association this year, working with the governor and working through the legislative process, we're going to do everything we can to try to enact some more things and make it mandatory for people.
Sheriff, thank you so much. I very much appreciate you coming in.
Locke, my pleasure as always.
Locke Meredith with Legal Lines, my special guest, Sheriff Sid Gautreaux. Thanks for being with us.